Raise your glass and welcome to Irreverent. So this is Irreverent, episode 6.
Episode 6. You know, I've been drinking since 2008, 2009, and I still sometimes feel lame when I'm trying to open up a bottle of wine. So just know, you might always feel that way. I can do it. I can do it. I believe in myself.
Sounds good. So with mine, I am making a Michelada, I think is what it's called. It's basically beer mixed with something that is very spicy, like a not a margarita.
Bloody Mary?
Bloody Mary. And I had one the other night. It was really good here in Texas.
It was really good.
And
I approve of that drink, even though I don't know how to pronounce what it's called.
It was spicy as hell. So
hold on. Here we go.
Oh, nice.
There. Now you all know.
Perfect.
I'm really doing this as we speak.
Yeah. So we're going to be making this, and I'm going to put a recipe on here. I'll give you guys the recipe as I go. And I got the recipe from a friend of ours who is a bartender, and he is very kindly going to be in our video that we're making.
Very excited about this.
Yeah.
This has been years in the making. We just never did it. Now we're going to do it.
It's going to be a how-to drink for ex-Mormons.
Multi-segment edition of a video we'll upload to YouTube. Kind of talk about the basics of alcohol, what different liquors are, the different types of wine. We'll just finally do that. I mean, because when you leave the church and you start drinking, you have no idea what you're doing.
So here's what we're going to do. And I like this because I feel like I'm doing a little science experiment. We're going to fill a glass with ice and put the juice of about 2 to 3 lime wedges in it. Okay. I filled the glass with ice, and I am using a hydro flask because this is going to turn into a mixer, like a shaker. And I want to be able to shake the everything I need in this shaker. And I didn't want to do it in my glass. So I've got a glass prepared, and it is a
Can I just pause for a minute?
Okay.
Before you go into the recipe, I want to explain our little situation. We've moved to Texas.
Yeah, we're newly here. 1 week.
We're here in our new place for 1 week. We don't have our stuff, so this is why I want to say this before you're going to go into the glass that what you're going to pour in. We have moved to Texas. If you haven't been following me on social media, then that might be news to you. And we left California, came here, got a place, and we didn't bring our stuff with us because we have to go back to California. Jim's daughter's getting married, so we're very excited about that. We thought, let's go get set up basically in Texas. Mm-hmm. We'll drive back,
which we are,
get our stuff, or go to the wedding, get our stuff, and come back. So because of that, we don't really have a full kitchen with our stuff.
We have like 4 coffee cups.
Yeah, 4 coffee cups. We had 2 plates, a couple forks, knives.
Yeah.
So we went to the store today as we were prepping for our Irreverent Sessions, and we bought these cool $1. I bought some wine glasses that have like what do you call this?
It's like a Day of the Dead skull from Mexico.
They're just little plastic cups, but they have cool designs on. So you bought a big one.
And I've already put the salt on the rim, and it's because it's different than a margarita where you just have regular salt. This one's a little more festive.
Spicy.
It's spicy salt. It's a reddish salt that we found just for this type of thing. And then what you do is, Amy told me, you take some lime and kind of rub it around the rim of your glass. And then you turn your glass over and you rub the rim of the glass into this salt that is on a plate. And that allows the salt to then stick to the rim of the glass. So as you're taking drinks, you get a little bit of a kick from the salt it's like really good for your heart. Okay, so here we go. Fill a glass with ice and put the juice of 2 to 3 lime wedges in it. I'm doing that right now. We want this one. All right. That's in the ice in the hydro flask.
Which is doubling as a shaker.
Put a couple dashes of Worcestershire sauce in there too, or Tabasco if you want spice, but we're going with Tabasco because we want spicy. Fill it then with 3/4 of any beer. So I chose a Mexican beer because I feel like this is more of a Mexican style drink. So I'm going to put the Tabasco in. Okay, then you fill it with 3/4 of any beer. So I've got this. I went and bought this Corona. I have a 1-quart bottle of Corona beer. 1 quart. Okay, here we go. Okay, there's that. One last thing. Zing Zing Bloody Mary mix. So I don't know if they have that in all states, but they have it here in Texas. So you add a Bloody Mary mix right about now. And these Zing Zing Bloody Mary mixes come in these little cans. You know the can, like when you buy Red Bull, that tall, skinny can? It's about that size. Mm-hmm. But it's a Bloody Mary mix. Green can. I'm going to... You hear that? Mm-hmm. Okay. Here it goes. I'm pouring it in. Ooh, that's like... It looks like a...
tomato juice.
Tomato juice, yeah. It looks like a V8. Pour it out into a shaker, salt the rim of your glass, and pour it back in. I'm going to do the shaker. Ready? That makes a pretty decent shaker.
I know. How is it? Do you like it?
It's really cold, and it's really good.
Cold is good. So I splurged on a bottle of wine tonight for all you guys. Just, you know, I have to do my part. I want you guys to know the things I do for you.
For you.
So you actually, when we were at the store tonight, looking, you said you should get a Texas wine. Yeah. So I did. And this particular wine is a white wine. Skeleton Key is the brand. And it is a Texas wine. So grown in a vineyard here. And I like it. It's easy. It's not sweet. You know me, if you've been listening to these others, not too sweet. So I like it. All right. I'm going to make sure I'm drinking my wine in a nice, consistent manner through our show. I just want to, at the top of the show, talk to you about, we are going to probably be talking about sex on this episode, and we're going to be irreverent. So if you want a trigger warning, this is your warning. Proceed with caution. I just want to make sure that's out there. I know we're all at different places, but we're going to talk a little bit about sex and purity culture and all of that. So here we are. This is our first irreverent episode in Texas. I'm very excited about this. I'm not inebriated enough though, so I'm going to take some big drinks here.
It's a good idea. So did you say we're talking about sex?
Let's talk about sex, baby.
Yep.
I think we talked about it a little bit in one of our previous episodes, but...
A little bit.
A little bit.
This is partially because I kind of was pushing, like, maybe we should talk about a lot of the ways the church has kind of messed with our heads when it came to sex. Mm-hmm. Such silly things as the changing of the garments. I know that isn't sex, but that is part of the whole...
Well, it's part of the psychology that goes in your brain when you're taught to keep your body modest. Mm-hmm. And so when you have that as your baseline, which isn't even really the baseline because this starts as a young child, you know, all of the ways that we are conditioned. And so when you put your garments on as a 18, 19, 20-year-old and beyond, I think it keeps your brain in a certain spot.
Yeah. To be honest, when I was having my washing and anointings done.
Oh, boy.
In the temple, mm-hmm. Nobody really explained what that was all about. And you know, you're naked.
They don't do that anymore.
Of course not. What do they do anymore?
I don't know.
It's actually like the Presbyterian church now.
Yeah, right. It's never what it was.
That's why they don't want to call them the Mormon church anymore, because it's really not the Mormon church anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can talk about that, what they did, what they used to do.
What, you mean a week ago? How long ago did they change it?
I don't really keep up with all the exact changes. I just know that a lot of the temple has changed since I started in 1990.
When garments were around in the first place, a lot of the old timers, I remember when I was young and first getting garments, you'd hear stories about people saying, well, you never take off your garments unless you're taking a shower, and you literally step out of the shower into your garments so that they are never off your body except when you're washing your body. You know, when we were on our missions, I remember our mission president said, it's okay to take off your garments when you go play basketball.
Exercise.
And then they took basketball out of the curriculum. You couldn't go play basketball because too many guys were getting hurt. It's always about the insurance policy.
It is. Not about the devil having control over water. So what I kind of want to talk about, and I think this might be I think this might be a great way to start, is this whole concept of virginity. I saw a meme the other day somewhere, and you know how it goes. Usually I try to snap a photo of it or keep it somewhere, and I didn't, and I wish I had. But basically it was talking about this whole concept of why is the concept of losing your virginity even a thing?
Right.
Like that it's even something to be lost. Because even just framing that, which Mormon culture, I don't know if I really remember. I mean, you just weren't supposed to have sex, basically, because sex was second to murder, right? Like if you had sex before marriage or out of wedlock.
Well, you want to go back before Mormons and go back to like Catholicism where that started?
Yeah, because it obviously doesn't start with Mormonism. It's part of Christianity at large. And if you can control people's sex and sex drive and sex you can ology, you can control the masses.
So what I've heard is the need to eat is the strongest urge we have. Sex is the number 2.
Okay. I would say it's different, though, in the sense that, yes, it's an urge humans have. Some, not all.
Strength of urge.
But it's not needed to, you can live your whole life without having sex. You won't die if you don't have it. Well, it's definitely a strong urge for many people.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you can control food and sex and how people do those things where they feel they have to answer to you, that's power.
I know I've often thought about what would life have been if there was no parameters put on that as far as, the way we have judged it. What would be so different about our society if it wasn't put in a category, for example, that you lose your virginity and that you are a terrible person? I mean, obviously, I don't believe that, but that the guilt and shame that I felt, I've mentioned before, when I went too far, quote unquote, with a boyfriend, is ridiculous. When all I was doing was experimenting with my own sexuality.
Right.
So, yeah, but you can go back to religion. That's where all of the concepts around this started.
Right.
Connected to religion.
And you think, why did they put taboos on all that?
Yeah.
And you think, oh, they were just looking out for us. Not really. They were controlling. That's control.
Yeah. It's such an interesting thing to think about. Because I think what different kind of person would I have been if I wasn't conditioned to believe that having sex out of the bonds of marriage, I mean, we could even just talk about marriage.
So to me, I think, it's really obvious to see in the church bounds how they work things. It's like the idea is to keep, let's pretend we're not talking about church. Let's just pretend you're talking about someone who buys your product. Because when you're a Mormon, you're buying the Mormon product.
Mm-hmm. I remember feeling when I finally left the church, and of course I had been with one man, and I remember having all the thoughts that I think many of us think about, like, what would I have done differently? When you are conditioned to believe that you have to, like you were saying, agree with what you've been taught, which in this case you're talking about the product, you can't have sex till you get married. You take all these young Mormons who feel the need to hurry up and get married and have short engagements, because
they want to have sex.
Mm-hmm.
They won't admit that that's the reason they want to get married so fast. Mm-hmm. But if sex were not the strong part it is, mm-hmm. they'd put it off. They'd be like, okay, we'll have a year, 2 year or more engagement because sex isn't pushing us for speed.
Yeah. Right. But that's the control. Because then you're kind of pledging allegiance to the church, right?
Right. The minute,
As now you're in the temple, and now you're taking on all these covenants, and now it's this big. To me, it was just like this big, huge commitment. At 20, I'm promising for the rest of my life.
Right, and I don't know if you went through this, and I don't know it would actually be interesting to talk to my ex-wife about this, because we're the two who went through the temple, and we're both virgins. We both go through the temple. I took her through. I still had tons of questions about the temple. I wasn't real sure about the temple. I don't know fully what she was thinking, but it was her first time when, just before we got married. So she might have been going, this is cuckoo. But at that point, what do? You don't have time to really sit and talk about it, because you're about to go to, you just got married.
Right. There's too many things to be excited about and think about.
So were you, what I'm trying to show as a story here is two people get married, right, in the temple. Mm-hmm. Like for me, I'd been through the temple a few times, and then I went on a mission. So I didn't really deal with it for 2 years.
True.
Then I come home. I didn't go to the temple a lot for the next year and a half, almost 2 years. Then I got married. So by the time I got married, I didn't have a lot of temple experience. It was still a little weird to me when I got married. But at that point, you're kind of in. I'm like, okay, now I'm getting married. So what I'm trying to picture here is two people the night of the wedding going, well, we're going to have sex. Mm-hmm. That's probably going to happen tonight. Hopefully, that's kind of your wedding night. And is there any thought in the back of our heads secretly about the temple? Like, what the fuck was that?
No, because I think Mormons have an ability, and I can speak for myself when I was Mormon, to compartmentalize. And so I wasn't thinking about the temple. Like, I was just trying to get to the main event.
But totally, exactly that's what I'm saying, is that you're now distracted with sex. And how brilliant is it of the church to say, okay, she's going to go through the temple probably for the first time hours before she has sex.
Yeah, right.
So I'm gonna say this, and men are gonna hate me. I think women in a lot of cases are really smarter than men. So here I was as a guy going through the temple and then going on a mission, and then I had 2 years to sit there and go, what was that about? But I kind of just let it go because now I'm on a mission. Yeah. Well, a woman, she goes to the temple and she's like, what the fuck? But she's having sex that night, which is a huge distraction from what the fuck just happened this morning in the temple.
Yeah. You're on to the next.
And there is no time to talk about it after you just got married.
Yeah, I don't remember
now you're going to
talking about the temple at all after.
Exactly, because you're too distracted with the reception, the cake, all that stuff.
Yeah, and having some apprehension. Like, you don't have any experience. You don't know what you're doing. I mean, I was full. I have to say, there are people who get married, and because of the conditioning of don't have sex, that kind of fucks with their brain. Right. And so to have sex afterwards is difficult. Right. That wasn't my problem. I mean, right. I'm just saying, like, I'm thankful that it didn't totally fuck me up. That
a million pieces
but there
to
are
that
so
story,
many people that does affect, and that breaks my heart, because here you are, and I feel like when you're young and growing up in the church, and you have lesson after lesson, week after week, being taught that you're like a used piece of gum, or you're like a sundae with a cockroach in the middle of it. That was one of the Mormon ads. Do you remember that? Where you have this pretty sundae, and then you take a scoop out of it and you're eating the scoop, but the picture shows like a cockroach buried in the middle. So like it ruins the whole thing.
So like I'm going out with a girl who's already had sex.
She's already ruined.
She's a sundae with a cockroach in it.
Yeah. Or she's like a chewed piece of gum. Someone's already had her. You don't want her.
Those are usually aimed at women.
Well, exactly. That's my point. And so here we are taught, like I remember this one lesson, and I didn't give it, but I was the Young Women's president. And one of my counselors was talking about our vessel. Our body is a vessel, and we need to keep it pure and clean. And she did this whole object lesson with a dirty vase. Like she had a dirty vase, and she had this bottle, and then she had another vase that it must have had bleach in it. Or like she poured this thing in there to clean it out. She was trying to teach what happens when you ask for forgiveness and you go through the whole repentance process, and because of the atonement, because of the atonement, you're forgiven. So you become virginal again. Right.
Sorry, I couldn't help you there. I totally forgot what the atonement was. No, I'm kidding.
Well, apparently half a glass of wine, and so did I. No, and I just think This is what I'm talking about. So no matter where you are on the spectrum, and I want to get back to the different types of sexuality, because to me, even I'm in a learning phase of trying to, I don't want to say trying to, but of understanding the different types of sexuality, and that we don't just fit into two places, right? There is a spectrum.
Right.
But I want to go.
Those are choices. I'm joking. We had an argument in the bar one time with a guy about being gay and whether it's a choice or not. So, I mean, I argued the point, no, it's not a choice. Yeah. I used to have an aunt. She'd passed away actually last year, but she was gay and took a long time coming out and was worried about what I thought because I was raised Mormon. And I'm like, I love you. I don't think anything bad of you at all. She was one of the coolest people I've known in my life.
You've always loved her.
All I'm trying to say is I would definitely argue for the fact that it's not a choice. I'm against what the church says about that.
Oh, of course, yeah.
But so when I said that just now, I'm just being a dick on purpose, just for entertainment purposes.
Thank you.
There's a huge range of...
which even I'm learning, right? I'm 50. I grew up in the 80s. Like, I am still open to learning and understanding, and I seek to understand, because I don't believe it's all just you fall into this category of heterosexuality. What's it called?
Heterosexuality?
Yeah. We're going to have to edit this. This is affecting me very strongly right now.
Wow, good.
I know.
I like it.
Anyway, I forgot where I was going with my story, but I just think that the side effect of being raised in a purity culture, and even though Mormonism didn't use that phrase, the side effect of that is far and wide, and how it plays with your psychology throughout and into your, obviously when you're Mormon and you're engaged at 19, like I was, and you're married at 20, 4 months later, and you're just barely figuring out what sex is, right? So it had the guilt and the shame is deeply rooted. And so I talk with a lot of people through coaching that have issues related to sexuality. And when I help them through and realize that there's hope for being stuck in that space, oh my gosh, I love it.
Hope for getting out of this.
Hope for getting out of that guilt and shame cycle.
Right.
So I know firsthand, personally, and just through clients and different people that I work with and, of course, talk with, about how that guilt and shame has formed, formed who you are.
Do a lot of people, when they come to you and they talk to you and they have these issues, that I'm sure they start off by blaming other people because, like we blame the church.
Yeah, sure.
A lot.
We blame the church for a lot of things. Yeah.
And I mean, to a certain point, that's fine because you know where it's coming from, and it's good to see where things started. That's where these thoughts originated, was from the church. Mm-hmm. And then after, now I realize, okay, well, I have to go back and go, okay, I'm dismissing that. That's not truth to me anymore. That never was truth. I was misled. Now I have to then take it. Do you have to tell people, okay, look, now we're going to work on your thoughts because you can't control the church?
Yeah, because of course, as one of my favorite life coaches talks about, 5 minutes ago is as far as in your past as ancient Rome. So that doesn't mean you don't need help with working through trauma and past abuse or past conditioning. Of course, that's what we're here. We're trying to figure this all out. But when I can help people start to reframe and coach from a place where they are empowered and the church is no longer in charge of them, even though logically we know the church isn't in charge of us. But this is the deconstruction process. This is what takes years to work through. This is why we can't leave it alone and all those things, because we are trying to make sense of how our brain functioned when we were believing members of the church. And now we're on the other side of the fence and we're trying to make sense of it all.
So logically, I know that as an adult, the church cannot control my brain now, but I have to bring up the concept of the elephant, the little baby elephant with the large shackle on his leg.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In that case, the shackle is the church, and that shackle can control the baby elephant. So he learns that he can't move
And he becomes a big elephant.
And he becomes a big elephant.
No shackle, but stays next to the stump that he was shackled to because it's so ingrained in him not to leave that spot.
So, I hate to say this, but in effect, the church can control your brain because they got it when it was little.
That's what brainwashing is.
I know. And so I guess where I'm going with this is at least the way you coached me on a few things. She coached me on some issues I had with my mom, who's a TBM. And believe
We've talked about
that
her.
Could go on for quite a while.
We've talked about her before on the show, I think, but she's not just, she makes TBM seem lovely and like a walk through the park.
She's brought her own set of issues to the whole TBM thing, but she's extremely TBM to a weird point. But that wasn't the point. The point is that you've talked me through both of that and then something that had to do with my art. And what you've said is we can't coach her, my mom. We can only you can only coach me.
Yes.
So basically, I guess what I'm trying to say is I have to do the work, and the work is in my own head. If I have to change my thoughts. So I hope that wasn't too coachy.
I know.
I think that's an interesting thing is because a lot of us want to blame the church for everything.
And it's cathartic for a long time.
True.
It
is part of the process.
Until you take your own power back. When you start taking your power back, you stop blaming as much. And it's a slow, gradual process. So I don't want to make it seem like it's just a walk in the park, but it can be. There's something very freeing about when you get to that point where you're deciding for yourself. And this means everything. Like, I want to talk about masturbation. I'm veering to the left.
Well, okay.
I don't know. Well, because this is something I learned, and I don't know if I've shared this on the show before.
The bishop talked about masturbation with me all the time. So,
bada bing.
So why can't you?
Good point. And we should have an adult rating on the show for sure. But what I think the church misses out on, because obviously you're not supposed to touch your body. Right? You're not even supposed to touch your own body. It's your own body. And when I was going through my faith deconstruction, and this is going to sound funny, but I used to listen to Dr. Laura.
I've heard.
And if any of you know, some of you who are younger might not remember Dr. Laura. Dr. Laura was, she had a talk show. She would be on what would now be on like
radio,
conservative radio. Like after Dr. Laura, I think Sean Hannity came on, which I always turned it off. I never really liked him. But I would listen to the people. What would happen is people would call in and she would give answers. And she was always very, I don't know why, she was just very curt and straightforward. I didn't like everything that she said. But something that I learned from Dr. Laura was that if you don't know how to pleasure yourself, how can you expect someone else to pleasure you? And especially as a woman, and at the time I was 36, 37, and how vulnerable do I want to get with you guys? But I was a very good Mormon girl, and that means I had never done that. And I remember listening to her thinking, that makes sense to me. How can I tell someone else what works for me if I don't even know? And so that opened my brain. And I was in a very open brain space because I was learning so much about the church, which meant I felt this is time for me to start connecting the dots. But when you are so ingrained, it almost felt like cheating on my husband or something. Like if he wasn't involved in the process, right, then that I was doing something wrong.
Where do you remember at all hearing where you got that idea?
Not specifically, but I would just say over 36 years of lessons in the church.
Lessons where? Because they don't say anything about that stuff in sacrament meeting. So I'm guessing Sunday school and young women's.
Oh, young women's. Yeah, I don't think they got
Mostly
that specific in primary, but I would say that, the 12 to 18 years where you started having more specific lessons around chastity,
People all talk vaguely about where they learn this stuff. I learned that in church. Where in church? Because I think we need to narrow it down just a bit.
That's a good question. Where were we taught not to have sex before marriage? Do you remember specifically?
I do remember. So there was this woman who was my Sunday school teacher, and she taught us about the chewed gum thing. And I remember her saying something about, you're giving up celestial kingdom for 3 seconds of, or 3 minutes. 3 seconds. For 3 seconds,
maybe
3 minutes, maybe 3 seconds. 3 minutes of pleasure.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember hearing things like that too.
We were 15.
Wow.
So we were being taught that by her.
Sure.
And then I remember someone even closer to us that we both know or knew. And there he was teaching us and talking to us. And this is an individual who's comes across very perfect. Perfect hair, perfect clothes, perfect speech. He prepared every week very well for his classes. And so you took it serious. I took it very seriously when I heard the things he said. And so I paid a lot more attention than someone I didn't know as my teacher, as my advisor. Yeah. And that was where I heard most of my stuff about sex back then that I can remember today.
Yeah, I would say most of it happens in young women's and young men's.
Right, that was young men's.
I think that it all happens in young women's and young men's. All the conditioning, the way people teach the lessons about waiting for marriage and all of that kind of stuff.
I'm going to add one piece to that, and that is certain firesides.
Yes, for sure. Youth conferences, all of that kind of thing.
Youth firesides. I remember being in someone's house in Costa Mesa for a fireside. And I remember being really excited about going there because I kind of liked this one girl who was like 3 years older than me, 4 years older than me.
Ooh.
And it was her house where they were having. And so they had all these chairs set up in the living room and they had the speaker. And that was the first time I heard a woman say very plainly to young girls, like I was 10 years old in this fireside. I don't think I was 12. There's no way.
That's awfully young, but...
It is, but I was only in that ward till I was 10, and then we moved.
Okay.
I remember this woman, it was a couple that spoke. So the husband spoke to the young men, and then the woman spoke to the young women. But they did it in front of everybody. It wasn't like they took the young women somewhere else like they do when they talk about your menstrual cycle in
elementary school.
Yeah. So this is all in front of everyone. And so this was the first time I hear this, and that's probably why it's still stuck in my head. I was probably traumatized by it. She says to the young women, when you dress a certain way, you're just being meat on a rack. Like, when they show meat in a butcher shop, she equated it to that. The chewed piece of gum almost sounded better than what she was saying, because I'm picturing this meat on a rack because you're wearing a bikini, because this is the 70s, so bikinis were kind of a thing. And I was just like a 10-year-old kid just going, what? Why are we talking about this?
See, and that's the shame of it all, is because your brain is like, okay. So you start picking up on things very young, right? You're 10. You're like meat on a rack. So if a girl does this, she's a meat on a rack. Like, what the fuck? Yeah, and let's talk about the hypocrisy here a little bit. The thing that always got me, and even way back when, is if a girl was promiscuous, as we would say when I was younger, she was considered a slut. Mm-hmm. A dude sleeps with a lot of girls, and he's considered a stud.
Yeah. Outside the church, inside the church, you just didn't talk.
Well, true, because
I didn't know anyone who had sex.
But still, it was like a double standard.
Correct.
It didn't.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it didn't matter in or out of the church. It was still a double standard. I don't know. I'm so far removed from purity culture and the way my brain was back then. Like, I'm of the mind, like, if you want to experiment. Like, this is your body, and you get to decide. If you don't want to, don't. Like, I'm of that same too. Like, this is about what you are comfortable with. But finding the space that what you're comfortable with, sometimes you got to work through a lot of shit to get there. Yeah. With some of my clients, it's like, and we talk about masturbation and self-pleasure. It's like, that makes a lot of, especially women, kind of tense up. Yeah. Because that conditioning, even when you've left the church, we have a hard time like separating in our brain. Like, that's why I call it the residual effect. Sometimes we don't realize we're making decisions in life based on our conditioning because we're like, oh, I've left the church. It's fine. But if you find yourself judging or being too critical about other people and their sexuality, I'd say you need to check yourself, because that's probably for sure tied to some of your thoughts that you haven't worked through.
Right. I have a story now that you brought it back to masturbation.
Okay.
I guess it's not really masturbation, but it has a lot.
Self-pleasure is another word we could use.
True, but it has more to do with what you said about masturbation with Laura Schlesinger.
Yeah.
Dr. Laura, where she said, if you don't know yourself, how are you supposed to let the other person know need in order to feel good?
If you want to experiment.
I personally think that the leadership in the church doesn't give a fuck that you're pleasured.
True.
So they don't care.
No.
That you enjoy sex, just have more babies to pay more tithing.
Get married young.
That's
stay
the
on
product I was talking about. So
I agree.
I'm going to go back into my marriage. So here's what happened. We got married. We were both virgins. Like I said in a previous episode, when you get married as a virgin, you're dumb as
clueless. Don't know anything.
You're useless to the other person because you don't even know what you need to do. We were married for a certain amount of time. I just knew things were not going well for her. And I kept trying to ask questions and like trying to be very careful. And because I had a single mom. I grew up under a single mom. And one thing she did tell me is like, be very careful, don't be pushy, don't do this. Remember, and this is what she said, remember this, women don't enjoy sex like men do. Women don't want sex like men do. Women don't want sex as much as let me keep. Yeah.
I'm just gonna say, talk about conditioning or personal experience. Her personal experience.
Right. Well, that's what we do, right? We teach our kids our personal experience and screw them up for the rest of their lives. So, do you want me to take that out?
No.
I mean, that's how we ended up in the Mormon church, isn't it? So I didn't choose that. So
what did you think about that when she said that to you?
My mom?
Even way back then.
Well, I was like all of 9. So when I was 10 and heard the whole.
She told you that women don't like sex at 9?
Yeah, she told me all about the birds and the bees when I was 9.
And in that lesson was women don't like sex as much as men?
That men need to, yeah. Oh. Basically that men need, she was basically giving me her thing. And so you grow up, and I grew up thinking, all right, I don't know. I kind of took that, and you see how that messes with your head.
Yes, I'm sitting here.
But I wasn't thinking it was messing with my head. I just thought she's filling me in on how women think.
What your mom says is true.
She's a woman.
Yeah.
She should know.
She's speaking for the rest of all women.
And right. And there wasn't Oprah back then where you could sit there and go, maybe my mom wasn't so right about that. Maybe there are women out there who enjoy sex and understand their bodies and take, haven't. The way my mom did it, I think, is that she just expected men to do it. And one conversation we had years and years later, I was probably 28. And I found out she had never had an orgasm. And that's a strange thing to know about your mom.
Yes.
But it's also an awful thing to know. And it also aligned so many things. Yeah.
Totally.
And I said, why is that? Because I was just blown away.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you the rest of the story, why I'm telling you this. She says to me, I guess I was just with a lot of selfish men. So that means that a woman who's born in 47, raised through the 50s.
Yeah, different. Yeah, definitely.
It's a different time period.
For sure.
Was never taught that women were even supposed to enjoy sex.
Pleasure,
right? Because it was dirty. And that's something I heard marriage counselor in the church talk about too, that women in the church have been raised to think it's dirty to enjoy sex. So when it finally comes to the point where they're having sex with their husband that they married in the temple, they have all the guilt and the shame and everything like that, even though they did it all right.
Right.
But they don't, now that it's time to enjoy it, it's like, no, I can't.
Yeah.
So my mom had that too, even though she didn't grow up in the church.
Mm-hmm.
She grew up in the 50s. Same difference. So
true.
So I guess where I'm going with this is that with my wife, she was in that same spot. She didn't know. I didn't know.
And you didn't want to be that selfish bastard who couldn't figure it out
Right.
for her.
I wanted to fix this because I thought this is a huge part of our marriage. And we, I thought everything else was pretty good. So this is not, and I could tell this wasn't good. And then I could tell that she was shying away from having sex. Mm-hmm. She was, take it or leave it. How can you take it or leave it? So I went out and broke the rules.
Dun, dun, dun,
I was Mormon.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know who to go to. I don't have a dad. Well, I did have a dad, and I wish I had known him at that point in my life because he would have told me, because he was never Mormon. Anyway,
Long story short.
I rented a porn movie.
Like on VHS.
On VHS. And I brought it home and I started watching it and I watched what the guy was doing.
Like you studied it.
I did.
Yeah.
Like, okay, there we go. This, okay. It was like, this is connected to that and this is connected to that.
Oh, that seems to work.
She looks like she's having a much better time than my wife does. And guess what?
It worked?
It worked.
Well, that's what matters.
And I'll tell you what pissed me off.
Yeah.
I was angry that I had done everything the way I was supposed to do and it didn't work. Mm-hmm. The minute I broke a rule and bit of that forbidden apple,
yeah,
then things started to work. Mm-hmm. But I had to break rules of the church in order to do that by looking up some porn.
You had to step outside the box.
Yeah, this is a long time ago. There was no internet. Mm-hmm. So that's why you had to go to the video store.
In the room in the back with the curtain that came down. It was
embarrassing, especially for your first time.
I remember seeing, okay, it's totally sidetrack here, but the video store near us when we were growing up, like, you know, we were kids of the 80s. So like for my 14-year-old birthday party, we rented a VCR.
Oh, yeah. On Warner.
That video store, I remember it had the back room.
And so what'd you get?
No, I was a good Mormon girl. Uh-huh. But I remember going, oh my gosh, that's where you shouldn't go. Like the people in that room.
Behind the beaded curtain.
Behind the beaded curtain.
You could always hear them go in and out.
That's a good name for a book, Behind the Beaded Curtain. Beated.
Okay.
Oh boy. Anyway, I think that's the thing too. And I don't know if I've talked about this on here. And believe me, this wine's really good.
As we try,
okay,
talking about alcohol
I need to pour a little more in here.
Well, I want to talk about the fact that I am.
Do you need a refill?
Over halfway through this quart.
All right, so we took a little intermission. We had to have a potty break. And I also just posted that we are recording this right now on Instagram, my Instagram stories. If you guys aren't following me, follow me at Amy Logan Life. Follow me there. You can follow me everywhere. Want to plug for yourself? Because we can do that. What's your Instagram?
My Instagram is Brash Studios, but
at Brash Studios.
What I really want people from here, if they want to hear what I have to say, go to YouTube and go to Brash Religion.
Yeah.
Because I'm actually going to be picking that up a little more. I have 100
subscribers. 104
subscribers.
Go give him some more subscribers, you guys.
I've made some videos about church stuff.
Yeah.
Just because I felt that the more people who do that, the more of a voice it is as an ex-Mormon or an ex-religious person.
I think the more voices we can have or support of voices, those of us who do have, social media, the better.
Yeah. Well, because if someone is wronging the world, the way I feel like, in a way, the Mormon church is wronging people, teaching them incorrect precepts, all that.
Yeah.
That if nobody says anything, they're just going to keep doing it.
And I really, 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 really feel that our voices are getting louder. There are so many people leaving the church and people are talking about it. And that's what I love. Like, I don't want any of you listening to this, no matter where you are on the sexual spectrum, how you feel about this. Like, if you're just awakening to this, I know some of the stuff we're talking about can probably seem jarring, but this is how we learn. We talk about things, we explore things, we think about things. Always do what you feel is best, right? Like, always do what you're comfortable with. Don't ever feel pressured or that you have to be something other than you are. Take your time, read, study. There's so many people on Instagram who are sex positivity, who are helping people who, ex-evangelicals who have been through this too. Like, ex-Mormons aren't the only ones.
Right.
Or I should say Mormons aren't the only ones. There are people who are studying this and helping and can help you.
I did read
because sexuality is such a big topic.
Right. Yeah. I did read something on a ex-Mormon Facebook page. Just random people were kind of being a little negative towards all of these videos that are being made. Kind of like, oh, here's another person online who's, talking about leaving the church. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, what's wrong with that?
It was interesting to me that this is an ex-Mormon Facebook page where people are like kind of perturbed that people are making videos. It's like, good. It's good that more people are doing it, because then it becomes the norm.
A choir of voices, as we could say. Yeah, I guess the thing that I wish, like, you know how you go, if you could go back in time, I guess I wish I wouldn't have felt so guilty and shamed about trying to explore my own sexuality. And I wish that Amy of 16, 17, 18 would have felt, I mean, we're teenagers, so we're not going to feel as confident as I do as a 50-year-old. Maybe, I don't know. The younger generation seems a lot more confident than I did as a teenager, but there's no guilt and shame. Like, we're figuring it out.
Do you remember the movie Say My Name?
Yes.
It's about a young kid. Movie. He's a teenage kid, and he's gay. Mm-hmm. And he's coming to terms with that. And he's in Italy with his parents. Mm-hmm. And there's an older guy who they kind of have an affair. Mm-hmm. Should I tell the story? Should I ruin it for people? It's a beautiful movie.
It's been out a while. There's a certain point when a movie's been out long enough. It's okay.
But the way his parents dealt with him, to me, I watched that and I thought, I wished I had parents who dealt with me about sex, because it's a coming of age movie.
Yeah.
You can say it's a homosexual movie if you want to, but it's really a coming of age movie that's set with a homosexual kid. But who cares? I mean, don't get it.
No, but that's the thing. Like, my brain sees it now as a coming of age movie, and I don't judge the sexuality of the person.
Right, it doesn't matter.
But our Mormon brain does. American sex what's the word I'm looking for? Sexual culture is different than European sexual culture. Right. No, I don't want to go into the whole, I mean, obviously consent and minors and adults is an important thing to take into consideration here. But I think the beauty of that story is the love that his parents just loved him. Right. And they didn't judge him on it. And I remember with my kids, I remember telling them very strongly, even though I would take them, I would do things differently. But even when I took them, I knew they'd be going to worthiness interviews.
Yeah, I remember this.
I remember being so conflicted and so mad. But
that
part
of
it was the arrangement with my ex-husband, so that's what it was. But I remember driving them saying, you don't have to answer any question you don't want to. No one had ever told me that.
I know.
And I knew, as a post-Mormon, that they would be asking them if they masturbate. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted my kids to know that they don't have to answer that question. And so I was able to talk to my kids, and I talk to my kids a lot about sex, and almost to the point where they're like, Mom, we get it. Yeah. But I didn't want to do the thing where I just didn't want them to feel like I wasn't willing to talk. Like, if they had questions, I wanted to be there to answer them. This might be a good time to bring up that I used to teach sex ed in high school. I used to teach.
In what state?
In Utah. I used to teach sex ed at Timpview High School and at Payson High School. And of course, Utah curriculum is abstinence-based. So
what are you teaching? How to
You're literally teaching anatomy, male, female, here's the body, right? And basically don't have sex because you could get pregnant. And there was no gray area. You know, like I couldn't I couldn't expand.
Did you talk about birth control at all?
I could talk about it in the sense that this is a birth control pill. This is, could we mention condoms? This was a long time ago. It was just abstinence based. That's what I have to go by. Like, I had to legally only teach don't have sex.
It wasn't called sex ed though, was it?
No, it was just in the health class. It was a few chapters in our health class. I taught health. I also taught physiology and anatomy. And so I always had to be careful what I was saying. And even that brain of mine, I was like 23. I taught school from 23 to 27. I was 23 to 27. And even my brain was like, I knew my kids, the kids in my class, I knew some of them were sexually active. And I remember thinking, I just want to be able to teach them that they can prevent pregnancy.
Right.
And I was fully Mormon back then. And my brain was feeling that. So I just going back to the conditioning, it's so all encompassing, I think.
Yeah. Even there.
Oh, for sure. Especially. I think Utah's still abstinence-based education. And that's doing a disservice to our kids who are having sex and needing to know.
It's that idealistic thought process that, hey, well, kids aren't supposed to have sex, so they aren't going to. Yeah. Oh, wow.
Oh, kids are going to.
What school did you go to?
It's happening.
Yeah, these are people that, like, where were you in your teens? Were you not? What were you thinking? How can you be 50, 60, 70 years old and think that people aren't having sex when they're not because they're not supposed to?
Right. And I'm 50, and I remember being 16 and 17 and looking forward to Friday night when I got to make out with my boyfriend. Like, I knew what was going on. So like you're thinking about those things. Obviously, you're a teenager. You're a hormone.
That's pretty
That's
true.
Kind of accurate.
Yeah, just a big hormone walking around.
Hormones are raging. Yeah. I kind of wanted to talk about like the hypocrisy. So if any of you have been paying attention to like current events and Jerry Falwell Jr., it came out that he liked to watch his wife have sex.
With another man.
And, I don't have a problem with that. Like, people like all sorts of things. All sorts of things turn on people differently. And you have, fetishes, and you have sexual fantasies, and you have whatever.
But I would say the Christian...
It's a huge menu of things that turn you on, right?
Yeah. The Christian world probably says you shouldn't, she should only have sex with her husband.
True. That's where I'm talking about, like, whatever happens with people behind closed doors, however many people are involved, it's those consenting adults. What's the word? Right, or prerogative, whatever, if all people are consenting, like, I don't have a problem with any of that.
Did we mention that the wine is 14% alcohol?
Actually, this one's not. I chose the other one.
Oh.
I think this one is...
It's
12%.
Affecting you like it's 14% alcohol.
It's 12%. Anyway, I have a problem with the hypocrisy. And this is the problem with purity culture, is it sets the standard so high that nothing is okay except sex between a man and a woman after they're married. And so anything else is wrong. So here are these people having consensual sex with, I think it was consensual. I'm hoping that the third party was, I think that was someone of age. We could bring in the whole...
What does consensual mean to you?
That everyone has agreed to whatever is about to happen.
Okay. Because you brought age into it, so I thought...
Well, consensual meaning like they're adults. If all adults are on... Now we could go into high school love those people.
Okay, because there can be all adults and not someone can be non-consenting. That would be rape.
Exactly. That's why I bring up consenting.
Okay.
Everyone's agreed to what's about to happen.
Okay, but then you said age, which is a whole different topic to me than consensual.
True.
So you have 3 adults who are all consenting.
Yes.
Like you talked about with polygamy, you thought, well, polygamy is fine with me if everyone is an adult and consenting.
And hasn't been told since they're as young as they can remember that this is what they're supposed to do.
Right.
That's conditioning and grooming and all of that kind of thing. Like, I don't, if adults want to be in a polygamous relationship, I don't have a problem with that,
right.
Which is a little ironic.
So
being that the church founder, but see, he started it. Oh God.
Yeah, that's
so
whole
many things,
separate thing.
But I just say that's ironic because I'm like, I don't have a problem with it if everyone's on board.
So what was the hypocrisy that you were seeing with Jerry Falwell
So the
Jr.?
hypocrisy is they preach the sexual purity. And then behind closed doors, they're living the life that is authentic to them.
Right. The life they really want to live.
Right. And so I'm saying I don't have a problem with the people involved in the sexual thing if they're all on board.
Right.
I have a problem with preaching one thing and doing another.
Right. And that's an interesting topic for any type of religious entity is, do they have to do what they say? Or are they just acting when they're on stage telling everyone what they should do?
And how do you know? Until they get caught, right?
Can you watch a televangelist and just in your head say, this is just entertainment?
Maybe people do. I don't know.
That way, and if I were a televangelist, this is how I would go about it. I would say, well, if I got caught, that's just entertainment. You can't hold me to the things I say on there. I'm just a man. Gee, where have I heard that before? but you see what I'm saying?
Speaking as a man,
I can see someone come off and say, well, what I say on stage is God speaking through me.
No, I don't think that's the persona that they're presenting to the world. They're like, this is the standard. This is what we do. Collectively, we are sexually pure. And we don't participate in things that wouldn't be deemed sexually okay. Which, of course, inviting someone else to the marital bed. Oh. Is that a word? Marriage bed?
The marriage bed in some $69 hotel on the side of Route 45.
Hey, you know what? Anyway, I just find that, I guess that's the hypocrisy that I think is usually when you see these evangelical preachers fall, it's because someone got caught having sex with, a male prostitute.
But when they fall, do they really fall? I mean, look at how many things notable people in our society, I won't go into politics, but you know what I'm saying? They've all done some things. I'm going to say they
take a financial hit.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to.
But I mean,
right?
even like Jim Baker came back.
Did he?
Did he? I don't know.
They divorced, that kind of thing.
True, but I mean, how many of these people, like Jimmy Swaggart, remember when he got caught in the 80s?
Just pray for forgiveness.
Yeah, and it's just like, I wonder if their people think, oh, I even relate to him even more now because he's human like me. I'm trying to say why people, I think, like certain people that I would look at and go, well, I don't look up to this human being. I don't see them as a role model for me. But yet you see all these people who are sending millions of dollars to these people. And even after they make a mistake, so to speak, they're still being supported. And then they just go, oh, I'm a mortal vessel for the Lord. And I'm not perfect. And they're like, oh, we understand. And here's $100.
Well, whatever. I'm sure they use it to their advantage. I think this is what I mean. Like, the whole, your sexuality is up to you and only you and the people you bring into that situation.
But these people are selling the Bible.
Right. And so I have a problem when they're mixing it with some kind of authority. That's where.
Because they don't really have any authority.
Well, no. I don't mean authority like it's from God. I mean authority that they have kind of placed upon themselves.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why especially if there's sexual abuse between a person, a child or a young adult or even an adult, and a position in power in a religious position, that seriously fucks with your brain. And so there are people, and if you are one of them, I just am so fucking mad for you, because to have to dive through your spiritual beliefs and your relationship with God and your sexuality and what that means, if you've had someone who has abused you and taken advantage of that, that's a lot to sift through. And it's all jumbled together.
When we first joined the church, my mom was 28, I was 8. And I was obviously, I'm 8 years old, I'm a kid. And so she introduced bishops to me. Like, we were in one town when we got baptized, and within a year we were in another town and went to that ward. And so new bishop. And I was taught to respect my elders. I don't know that that's a thing anymore. But think about when you respect your elders, then you go in and they're asking you stuff about your personal, what you're doing with your body.
Right.
And you're like, nothing. I'm 8, Right. Or, maybe they don't ask those questions as much till you're like 12. 12 is when they're thinking, okay, now puberty's starting to kick in. It's just weird though, because you're taught to respect these people.
It's wrong.
And yet they're asking questions about very personal things. So, I mean, there's lots of things at that time in your life where you're kind of going, I guess this is okay. My mom trusts these people. She brought me here, and she trusts this bishop, or she trusts that. Could you imagine that something happens and then you're being asked questions and you're like, I guess this is okay. It doesn't feel right though, does it? But you can't say anything because you're a kid.
And that's why I was talking about the authority figure. That's the terrible, like, even if it's just an authority, then add the whole God layer into it and you're just like fucked.
And I think
fucked in the head, like, what is happening?
It's really possible that after that first conversation, several conversations about masturbation, which kind of gets hit a little heavy-handed. I mean, we got a little book they gave us about masturbation when we were 12. And like, I didn't even know what it was.
I know.
And here now I'm being educated about masturbation by the church.
Right. And I think, like, I got really involved with Sam Young when we were living in downtown Salt Lake. And if you guys don't know who Sam Young is, he had a huge crusade about stopping these sexually explicit questions that are being asked in interviews. Yeah. And I think that for Mormons, that's where a lot of that starts, is we are asked specifically, are we keeping the law of chastity? Unfortunately, some leaders take it to a different level and start asking very specific questions. And so when Sam Young was doing his fasting at Temple Square, like outside of Temple Square, we went downtown and we were there for a lot of that. And his waiting, basically like asking questions and asking the leaders to come talk to us or talk to him. Like, what is going on? You have to stop asking these questions.
Yeah, the leaders don't answer to us.
No.
They don't answer to anybody.
They are removed from most all of us. They keep their distance. And so he has story after story after story about interviews and people who've been through and had terrible experiences, abusive situations happen in the bishop's office. And that just should not happen. Like, without a doubt, that should not happen. So to say nothing else but the mind fuck that happens when you are conditioned of how to be sexually, that can stay with you for a long time.
Once you're 12 and you're being asked questions you're uncomfortable with, but you're being taught that it's okay for them to ask you those questions, and your mom's telling you that. So you're like, well, your mom
took you to the interview.
She should be looking out for me, and here I am being asked this question. It must be okay. That is the beginning of a long life of being asked questions. Every time you feel uncomfortable with a question, you just move along. When I was in the temple for the first time, I was uncomfortable. I thought some things were really weird. So I asked questions, but never got an answer.
Right.
So I then deferred to my thinking back when I was 12, when I was being asked a question in the bishop's office that I felt uncomfortable with, and thinking, well, I've been told that I should just have faith. So now we're messing with my faith.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Right. It's a connection that starts at, I would say, 8 to 12 years old.
You bring God into the equation.
Right. Now you can't separate God or the thought of God or the idea of God with what these people are doing.
Yeah. And your personal autonomy. Like, that doesn't even register because you're connected now to God, what God thinks you're supposed to do, what your parents think you're supposed to do. And now you're being asked by the bishop.
Right.
If you do these things, and your brain is conceding to authority.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you've been, basically your parents have given the permission for you to
You have been groomed in that direction.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it still doesn't feel right, but you're like, well, maybe I don't know.
Yeah.
And I was never abused by a bishop.
Yeah. No, and
that never happened.
Either. Right.
They asked all those questions, and that was difficult to deal with, uncomfortable. I could see the conditioning from answering the first question that's uncomfortable, and then it's kind of like, next time it'll be easier. Next time someone asks you a question that's uncomfortable, you already go, well, that happened before.
Yeah.
And nothing happened. I'm okay.
Right.
So I guess I can do that again.
That's
and it
what
gets
grooming
worse.
is.
Yeah. It just becomes easier and easier as time goes by.
And I think back to my brain, and I think I was so my leaders had authority over me, and I gave that to them because I was conditioned and groomed to do that, where I assumed that they had the power to know what was best for me.
Right. We thought they were inspired.
Yeah. And it's just, I took a deep dive to sadness in this discussion, but it's a heavy topic. And so many of us deal with sexual anxiety through the years. And it stems back to how we were raised and how we were groomed and how we were taught, how all of our sexual contextualization happened within the framework of right and wrong. And there's one way to be, which is for sure heterosexual.
Yeah.
Right. Anything else is not right. Yeah. According to Mormonism or Christian theology for the most part.
That's why I was saying that when you're married and there could be, you're both supposedly virgin. Well, what if somebody in that union was abused at one point? then you're bringing that whole thing into a marriage, and then that person might not talk about it.
And then that person feels guilty.
Right. So there's all
when
of
it
this.
Wasn't their fault
the other person
anyway.
is like sitting there going, what is going on? All kinds of things go on there. I mean, it can really mess with a marriage.
Well, and this might be a weird thing to bring up, but like, I think about the concept of how, as a woman, I was raised to believe that my greatest calling in life was to be a mother.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think about, if I had thought differently, would I have kids? And so I think in the context of sexuality, when someone's not even allowed to experiment with their sexuality or see what they think independent of what the church tells them that you're supposed to be heterosexual, where is the spectrum of what you're allowed to experiment with? And it's such an important part of who you are, whether you're asexual or homosexual or heterosexual or pansexual or like all across the spectrum. When you're supposed to fit into a tiny little mold of what the church deems is right, that literally has lasting effects on your brain. And then you're left to deal with the guilt and shame. I come back to that because if you're outside of the box that Mormonism is, you are conflicted. And so for the person who can kind of climb their way out of that and step into who they are as a sexual being or asexual being or however you identify, like that's huge, and it's hard. And so I just want to hug all of you, like scoop you up and say, I just want you to be able to step into who you are. That's always my biggest hope, is that you can bust through these false beliefs that we've been taught and step into who you are and embrace it, and don't be afraid of it, and know that there are safe places and there are people who will love you and accept you. And I don't even mean in the relationship way, but just that there are safe people you can come talk to if you're confused and conflicted and hurting. Someone's Instagram who I really like, if you guys are looking for people who are sex positive and who are also breaking down kind of the cultural norms that we as ex-Mormons have. I believe she's an ex-evangelical. But her Instagram is called Talk Purity to Me. And I seriously love her and all her messages and the things that she talks about. She brings up things that I didn't even talk about. And I think evangelicals even have I don't want to say different, because I think it's all the same. It's all shame-based for sure when we're raised as Mormon. But I love her perspective because it's a different perspective. It's coming from ex-evangelical. So she has this post on Instagram, and it's called, "My life didn't really start until I stopped living for my future husband." And I want to speak to that for a minute. And I'm sure that men go through this too. But as a girl growing up as a Mormon, I for sure was living my life for my future husband. Every single thing I did, I thought about how would this affect my future life with my family and my kids.
Now, is that something you just did because you're a daydreamer kind of kid?
No,
or were you taught to think that way?
I would think I was taught to think that way.
Tell me how.
For sure. Because every lesson you have is about how you're going to be a wife and a mother. And especially in Mormonism, it's all around the eternal family.
How young do you think you were when that started?
In primary.
Jeez.
For sure.
Give the kid a chance to be a kid.
You don't even have a chance. I mean, yeah, for sure. And it just kept building, as you turn 12 and go into Young Women's, like that was like, I could not wait to be in Young Women.
So did you have a hope chest?
Yeah, I did.
And what do you put in a hope chest?
Oh my gosh. I put dishes.
And when did you get your hope chest?
Gosh, like I literally was gifted. This is interesting. I hadn't even prepared for this one. I literally received a hope chest when I was 12-ish. I think it was a Christmas gift. And that hope chest, I don't even know if that's a thing people do anymore, but that hope chest was to be filled with all the things that I would bring into my future marriage. So let's talk about conditioning. Growing up in California, we had a grocery store called Ralph's. They still have them in California. But when I was a kid, they would have these specials where if you spent a certain amount of money, you could buy these dishes for not that much money, you know, so like maybe you could buy a plate or a cup or a set of complete dishes for like, I don't even know, $8. I'm making that up. I don't remember the price. I would have when my mom would go do her grocery shopping, I would bring my money and buy the dishes. Whatever she spent, I would buy the dishes so I could put them in my hope chest, which I did.
Do you still have the dishes?
No.
Were they crap?
I don't even still have the husband. No, they were cute. I mean, I was excited because I'm like, that's where my brain was. That is how conditioned we are, that I'm supposed to be a wife and a mother, which is for sure centered around purity culture, because to be a good wife and a mother, I had to keep myself worthy. I couldn't have sex before marriage. I wasn't supposed to let anyone touch me before marriage, right?
Yeah.
And so here I'm building this hope chest full of dishes that I purchased from Ralph's. Like, what? Like, pre-16-year-old girl is buying dishes for her hope chest. This one.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not alone in that. And I would put things, I'm trying to think of the other things. I have not thought about this hope chest forever.
Okay, let me read something real quick.
But I literally had a hope chest that I brought to our marriage. Oh my God. Jesus.
What was it made out of? Cedar?
It was cedar lined, yeah, for sure.
Which is a good chest, so you can use it for other things. So, this is something I just looked up online. It says, in their 2011 book, The Hope Chest, and then it names these women who wrote this: Jackie D'Alessandro, Julie Kenner, and Susan Kearney. So they write about the Hope Chest, what the history. So the quick history.
Okay.
So Hope Chests have been in existence as long as furniture itself, yet why doesn't every household have one today? And she says, also known as a dowry chest, a trousseau chest.
I know all those words, yeah.
Or cedar chest.
Yes.
A hope chest is a large trunk of items given to a young girl for her future as a married woman.
Yep, exactly.
The tradition is said to have been centuries old and has no pinpointed origin. But dependent on one's customs, it can also be seen as a woman's dowry. The latter refers to the money or property a woman brings to her husband upon their marriage, a tradition that is even mentioned in the Code of Hammurabi. I don't know what that is.
I don't know what that is.
Which is estimated to be from 1792, roughly. So it's basically an old idea that has nothing to do with the way things work today. Kind of like that door on the side of a building that you can see. It's the second floor up, and there's a door up there. A long time ago, there used to be something that door went to, whether it was a stairway or a hallway to another building or whatever, but now all that's gone and that door means nothing. It's useless. I think a lot of the things that are from the past are useless.
Well, think about what we called it. It was a hope chest.
Yeah, what were you hoping for?
So it was a hope of that perfect marriage.
Right.
Where I could be the perfect mom and we could be married in the perfect temple and live these perfect lives.
Right.
That was my hope. Because for sure, that's how I was raised. That's how I was conditioned. And I think you guys listening for sure can relate to this. That was the expectation. And if anyone tells you differently, they're full of shit. Because that was for sure the expectation when I was a 12 years old and younger. But I would say it starts hitting hard around 12 because you
start to understand a little more what
you're in Young Women's
is.
And that's the hope that you are building and I know that's not just a Mormon thing. The hope chest and the dowry and all of that stuff was been created probably before Mormonism was. But that has huge psychological consequences and effects on you.
Yeah. Especially today that we've now grown past those kinds of ideas.
I remember I probably sold it at a garage sale one time, but I used all my dishes and I was married and having kids and all that kind of thing. But I think the Mormon church bases so much emphasis on the eternal family, right? And you need to be, here's the checklist. Here are all the things you need to be doing. And for sure, high on that checklist is living a chastity, virtuous, virginal life.
So Hope Chest is a lot like a vision board.
Yes, that's awesome. Not that the hope, but your concept there is.
Well, all I can say is it worked for you.
It did work for me. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, it worked
I got the husband, and I got
directed your
temple
life.
marriage, and I had the kids, and I had the perfect little world.
Right. And you said you even used the dishes that you put in there.
Yeah, I did. What do you think about this particular episode?
It got serious.
It did.
I was, all day today we were going over the things we wanted to talk about.
Yeah. And joking a lot.
Yeah, we were joking a lot. And, maybe we should have recorded while we were there. We had a burger.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, we're having fun and it's really jovial. And then we actually sit down and we prepare to do these. I mean, this takes a lot of work to put these together.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, then it got serious all of a sudden.
But I think that is the power of conditioning. I think that is what happens when we are raised a certain way. It's not lighthearted. Like, sexual purity is a huge fucking topic.
Yeah.
And to see how we've been conditioned and how it is played out in our lives. Like, I think back to the guilt and shame I had in my life when I was doing something not on par with what purity culture would be.
Yeah.
And how I would hang my head in shame and cry and feel guilty and feel dirty and feel like I was no longer pure and virginal, even though I didn't technically have sex till I was married. But that's heavy stuff. It's not all lighthearted. Like, I can poke fun at it, and I think humor is a huge cathartic way a lot of us deal with this kind of thing. But the truth of the matter is that fucks you up for a while.
Yeah. I think what fucks you up is that they attach God to it.
Exactly. And I think that as long as we can keep opening the conversation and talking about it, and I know you hate the term join the conversation, but I think that the more we can talk about it and normalize, I see that that's a big, I see a lot of people saying, normalize saying I love you, normalize realizing there are different
which is why we're making this recording in the first place.
That as long as people start to realize there are safe places, and I hope that people listening to my podcast, Exmormonology, and even our Irreverent here, it's my wish that people know that this is a safe space. And there's nothing you could tell me that would be not okay. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm like getting verklempt. And I mean that seriously. Like, the love I have for my people who have gone through what we've gone through is very real.
Yeah, there's a unity there.
Yeah. And so, like, we all experience purity culture differently. And it affects you differently. It affects me differently. Like, we're just trying to find common ground here. And I just don't want you to feel like you're less than because you don't fit the cultural narrative of Mormonism. Even if you are Mormon and you're listening to this podcast. Like, I love you the same. But I want you to feel comfortable in your sexuality and your experience of it and your brain. Like, I think we've been so conditioned that anything outside of the heterosexual narrative is perverted and wrong.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I want to be like, no. It's like we were in downtown Austin yesterday, and one of the hotels that's kind of iconic, downtown Austin, they have a sign outside that says all, new word, ways, new word, welcome.
Always welcome, but split. Always we're
welcome.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who you are. You're welcome in our circle. And yeah, this takes a serious topic because people do commit suicide over this.
Right.
People do take their lives. People do feel like they're shit.
Right.
Because of the fucking church and their narrative.
And that's an interesting thing to have.
God damn it,
It's interesting to have an organization that makes some people feel good, I guess.
Yeah, if you fit the normal, whatever. I mean, there's no normal, but whatever.
But the thing is they're pushing so hard for this perfection, and the only scripture I can find that really nails down what perfection is in Matthew in the New Testament, where Jesus says, "Be perfect like me and like God." Well, that's fucking impossible, isn't it? And so I think maybe people need to try to be better, but I think it's a little silly to try to be perfect when we know we can't.
No, being better means just being kind to people.
Right.
And that means You're all welcome in my world.
But you see, though, you know what I'm saying is that, like, you know, here's some
that fucks people up.
Gay kid growing up in the Mormon church,
right,
trying to be perfect, and then he realizes I'm gay, and that doesn't fit perfection in this church. And then so they're really shattered as to what the hell they are, when really they're fine, they're perfect.
They're perfect.
They're just in the wrong fucking church.
Right. In the wrong fucking narrative.
Yeah.
Like that, and that does fuck with your head. And
I would be ashamed to have invented or be part of a church that made people feel like that.
Inferior. There's no inferior here.
Fuck them.
And there's a way we can end this episode. All I can say is I'm so glad to be on this side of it where I don't judge anymore. That side of it. I mean, like, I may have judgment towards the Mormon church, but I don't judge wherever you are along the spectrum. Like, we're all in this together. There's no I'm better than, you're better. Like, we're just all trying to figure this out.
Yeah, and we should applaud people who are making videos and making podcasts. You know, the more the merrier.
Yeah, for sure.
And, you know, because it's...
And people creating a safe space.
Yeah, yeah.
Because for years and years and years and years to come, people will be leaving what is called the Mormon church, or as they say, whatever they call themselves now. I will always
Someone's going to look
Mormon
in the
church.
bag and go, are there still any Mormons in there? Who's still in there?
Jesus Christ, can you guys just like get over this whole sexual thing? Like, let's move on. There are other parts to life.
I think it will die out.
Do you?
Yeah. I think the church... we want that day where, like, everyone goes, oh.
We want, like, a reckoning, right?
I kind of want an apostle to get up and go, you know what? Sorry, guys. This is a big joke. Could you imagine an apostle having a faith crisis? And he's like, yeah, sorry. I've been faking this for the last 25 years. And so this is kind of a lie. And, you know, I can't. My conscience won't let me do this anymore. Right. Could you imagine that happening?
No.
Maybe it's happened and they've just edited it out.
Oh, well, if they did it at General Conference, it would have been taken out for the, like, edited out.
But someone would have heard it.
But you bring up a point that I want to give a little shout out. And I don't even know this person, but Mitch Shira, I think that's how he says his name. He's a actor impersonator. He has a TikTok channel.
Oh yeah, the guy who does the voices.
He does like different prophets' voices, and it's hilarious.
Right, he's doing the
he like
apologies.
sounds like Gordon B. Hinckley or Thomas S. Monson or like all of those people, and it's funny.
Yeah.
But the other day he did one in each of those voices as if they were apologizing.
Right, I heard that. Yeah.
I started crying. Like, not like sobbing, but I felt myself getting...
It's supposed to be
funny. I felt myself getting verklempt, and I realized there's a part of me that wants the fucking church to apologize to us.
It's the least they could do.
It's the least they can do, but, like, go find him on... I'm not even on TikTok, but I've seen him, like, everyone's always sharing his videos, because he's super good. Like, huge shout out. Go follow him. Like, whatever you do on TikTok, go do it. Because I feel like... When I heard that, and you guys, I've been out since 2006, essentially. I found my heart going, oh my gosh, if they would just say they're sorry. Mm-hmm. That's it.
But they'd have to shut the church down after they said they're sorry.
And I know
an apology by itself, verbal, is not enough. They know that if they apologize, that would be the end.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I would like to think it would be in the end, but
exit stage left.
But it was something about hearing those voices that we have all become very accustomed to, and hearing them say things that we want to hear but know we'll never hear. That I went to that place like, oh. All right, what do you think? Have we hit all of the happy, funny, sad, emotional?
Oh, sorry,
deep?
This one wasn't very funny.
It's okay. This isn't called the funny show. This is called the Irreverent Show, and talking about topics that are a little more difficult to talk about, no matter how it comes across, is fine. Okay, you guys, that is it for this week's Irreverent. Please make sure you go follow us on our social medias, at Amy Logan Life.
Mine would be YouTube and Brash Religion. Just look up Brash Religion. That's BRASH. Religion.
Yeah. All right, you guys, love you, and we will be back for another Irreverent soon.
Bye.